I mean, this is something that's extraordinary, which is that very large institutions are normally quite slow to react to anything, to any circumstances. And for the academic institutions that we are part of or that we're familiar with to be reacting as quickly as they are suggests the perception, at least, of a very, a major threat. Perhaps also as an extraordinary opportunity. I think both, but a big deal. Let's just say that the stance that, this is just sound and fury, but nothing substantive is going to come of it. Everything's fine. Don't worry, guys. That doesn't seem to be a position that is dominating the discourse as far as I'm seeing it. What I'm seeing is a more serious concern that this new technology represents a legitimate, really assault on the existing business model for education, as it were. And I don't know why that's the case. I don't know whether it's just people have had their eyes open to the technology so far, or whether it's more about concern of where things will go in the future, and it isn't so much of a concern about where things currently are, or maybe it's a combination of both. I don't know.
I think it's rather shallow in some sense. It's simply that some assumptions have been invalidated and cannot be ignored. So, I mean, students cheat. Everybody knows it. It's a constant of education at any level. At university level, we know that many students handing in assignments didn't actually do the assignment. We put up a kind of a show of caring about it and going after the really egregious cases, but anybody who's cheating knows they get away with it much of the time. You sort of know where the limits are, or you get a sense of them if you're doing it systematically. And if we were to try and eliminate cheating as lecturers, it would take up all of our time. I would be writing 20 case letters to the dean every semester and then dealing with the aftermath. It'd be a nightmare, right? So there's an equilibrium where we pretend it's not happening as much as we really think it's happening, and the students pretend that they're not doing it, and more or less many of them actually are doing enough work to credibly pretend like they've learned something, etc. So there's an equilibrium there, and it kind of works. But with ChatGPT, just some of the assumptions underlying that equilibrium are destroyed, right? So you can now assume that every assignment you see is to a large extent generated in some areas, right? Like low-level mathematics, probably first or second year writing tasks could be largely done. So it's just that it's kind of like the illusion gets stripped away and you have to deal with the reality that was in some sense already there. And so that will be reacted to, but I think probably in a very superficial way, where people will just invest in some snake oil detection algorithms that won't work, or maybe work for the next 10 minutes.
One of the things that I experienced as a culture shock personally, was the transition back to the American education system after having done all of my secondary school overseas. Excuse me for a second. So I did not go to middle school and high school in the United States. I was living abroad, and I was attending schools that were predominantly British in their education curriculum and style and educational culture. And what at the time, this was the 80s and early 90s, multiple choice tests were not part of the British educational lexicon and system at all. It just people didn't ever do them. Many people didn't know what they were. And the American students or the students who were destined for American universities at that time, this is pre-internet, we suffered quite a bit because we weren't able to practice multiple choice tests, the standardized tests like the SAT. We weren't familiar with those, so we'd never taken tests like that at all. And so it was a very alien thing. And then when I went to university in the United States, most of the examinations in my freshman and sophomore year, certainly, so the lower division undergraduate courses were multiple choice. And I found, I found that shocking, but then also because because it wasn't automatic, I challenged the assumptions behind it, right? If you had just grown up with that as a child, you don't challenge those assumptions, you just accept it. So I came in with quite a hostile attitude towards this, and I thought, why are you using these as your evaluation tools? And it was instantly obvious why. It just saves you work. It was a way to use technology to automate examinations. It's pure and simple. And the Scantron system was absolutely a technology disruption of examinations, which previously had to be administered and graded by hand. Now you didn't even have to proctor exams. People could just take them on the computer, but you could take them, by hand and fill out the Scantron forms, fill out the little bubbles with your number 2 pencil, and then they're graded automatically by machine. It just removed so much work from the job of being an educator, not to have to grade examinations and quizzes and so forth. And one of the things that went along with that is that American education stopped teaching students how to write that essays, and it became much less of a focus of the education as everything pivoted towards multiple choice tests. And I'm being a little bit cynical here, but the other big reason for multiple choice tests allegedly is that they're standardized, so you can conduct statistical analyses on them more easily than you can handwritten tests. But obviously, all of that benefit to the educators is going to vanish if students can escape the actually being evaluated and are able to cheat using new sets of tools. And I think what's ironic is that we're one potential pathway is that the universities and perhaps even middle school and high school will have to return to the old-fashioned way of examining students, which is sitting them down in a room and making them actually write with a pen and pencil, or even a more old-fashioned, sit them on a chair and orally examine them, and find out what they know. And have them stand there one-on-one in front of the board with you as the educator, and do the math problems on the board. And if they can do them, well, they've mastered the material. And if they can't, you'll know it in a few minutes, right? So, but of course, that's a huge amount of work. Gone will be university courses with 500 students and 2 instructors, because it's not possible to administer oral examinations to that many students. So the business model will break if you had to return to a model where it was a much harder job and required much more time for educators to actually conduct examinations of their students. So it's an interesting situation, right?
Yep, indeed.